Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Gameday Gameplay, the sports segment of Console Space. I'm your host, Sean Colangelo, joined as always by the man I envy the most in the wintertime, Todd from Florida. What's up, man?
Not much, Sean. How's it going, brother?
Oh, just hanging out on Valentine's Day.
Yep, same
Uh,
here.
it's an interesting holiday. Are you and the missus doing anything, or are you just laying low?
We went out to dinner yesterday. Um,
Okay,
we were
I got
both
you.
off, so we avoided the V-Day crowd.
That's probably a good idea. Have you ever tried to go out like the night of? Because it's literally impossible. Like,
I mean, we have before, I believe. But we were gonna go to the movies today, but I think I'm probably gonna push that back to tomorrow, just 'cause, like you said, day of. It's there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people out, so.
yeah, it's crazy. Like, if you don't have a reservation, you're probably not gonna get in to
Yeah.
virtually anywhere. But yeah, me and Aaron, we've been together for 10 years almost, so we don't really do anything too crazy. But I did get her a small box of chocolates that she'll probably be pleasantly surprised by. So,
Gotcha.
uh,
Yep.
anyway, so I assume there's not really much going on in the MLB, and obviously
No.
we're past the NFL season, so I doubt you have much there either. Um,
I've got a little bit to talk about with the NFL, but not a ton. We can save that for last if you want, or however you want to do it. But
that's fine. I was gonna ask, have you been watching the Winter Olympics at all?
some highlights. Not really watching it. Like I watched the highlights of Shaun White's run in the men's snowboarding. I watched the women's hockey team beat I technically the Russian team. I guess they're not allowed to be called Russia. They're Olympic athletes from Russia because of the whole Russia doping scandal. But
Yeah, I actually didn't really. Do you know what exactly happened with that? Because I wasn't really even aware.
from what I've kept on it, keep in mind I've not followed the Winter Olympics a lot this year because the only event that I like is being not gonna be not great this year because no NHL players are allowed to go. So, um, but I guess they got caught in the last games. Russia did with a bunch of their athletes doping somehow. I don't know exactly what they were taking, what they were doing, but that's a big no-no in the Olympics. And they basically said, we don't want to. They're allowing, I think, 169 total athletes from Russia that have been proven to not have been involved with it. They weren't doping the last time they ran, and they're not, they never got caught doing it. They're allowing them to go, but they're not allowed to actually represent Russia, and they're not allowed to fly Russian flags or anything. So,
Huh. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I feel like a lot of Olympic athletes probably dope though, but it's just a
it's
matter of whether you get caught.
one of those things you get caught. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of like steroids back in the baseball days in the heyday of the MLB. It was, everyone's doing it, but if you get caught, we have to punish you, kind of thing. So,
Right. Yeah, I haven't watched very much. I mean, I don't know why, but I like to watch curling, even though I have no idea what the hell's going on. Um, as you mentioned, the main reason I like the Winter Olympics is for the hockey, but that's obviously a little dumbed down this year since no players from the NHL are going. So
yeah,
that's a bummer.
I can tell you right now, it's probably going to be Russia that ends up winning it. Because of the talent from the KHL that's able to go. I mean, they've got like Datsuk's on their team, Kovalchuk's on their team, Nestorov's on their team. Um, I mean, that's gonna be hard for these other guys to keep up with.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know what I mean? So,
What about Ovi? I thought he was gonna go. I thought he was gonna go play.
he's not allowed, man. They won't let anybody that's on an NHL contract go.
Yeah, but I thought that he didn't he say he was gonna go, and they said they were gonna let him go, or was
I
that?
don't know. I don't know what happened. He's still with Washington, obviously. Washington
Yeah,
can't really spare him right now, to be completely honest with you.
yeah.
Playoff runs are getting tight there, so um, they can't really afford to let him go. I don't know if maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe Washington didn't think they'd be in first and trying to hold it down at this point in the time. So maybe they talked to him and said, "Hey, we can't really afford to spare you for 2 weeks," and he said, "Okay," kind of thing. But
Yeah. Well, with the waning news for football and baseball, maybe as that goes on, we will keep track of the Olympics a bit more.
yeah,
But all right, well, let's go head into it. You wanted to start with the NBA?
yeah, we'll start with the NBA. Don't have a ton for this, but obviously they just passed their trade deadline. That was last week. We already talked about that. The team that made the most moves at the trade deadline was the Cavaliers. If you watched last week's episode, remember talking about that. Um, it's looking like so far those moves are working out pretty well for the Cavs. They've won 4 straight games since they made those trades. The last two have been against pretty good teams, and they beat the Celtics and they beat the Thunder pretty handily in the last 2 games.
Hmm.
So it was a lot of roster shakeup, it was a lot of turnover, but it's still LeBron. You know what I mean? He scored 37 points against the Thunder last night, so that tells you all you need to know about his role with the team. But they're starting to put it together. They're starting to play better, and that's scary for other teams in the East because no one wants to run into the Cavs in the playoffs at all, especially when they're playing well.
Yeah, I feel like there might even be a slight correlation between the Cavs and the Pens, in the sense that they've been each kind of been struggling, but we've seen the Pens of late kind of turn it on and start playing a lot better, and the Cavs could obviously trend that way. You know, they're just they're teams that even if they are struggling, ultimately, if they get into the playoffs, nobody wants anything to do with them.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely,
so
absolutely, absolutely, right there with you on that one. Outside of that, the Steve Kerr is actually coming under a little bit of fire. Steve Kerr is obviously the coach of the Golden State Warriors. I don't know if you knew that. I know you don't follow NBA that much, but Golden State had a game against Phoenix the other day. Phoenix is an 18-40 team, so they're kind of bottom feeders. And Kerr actually let his players coach the entire game. He did nothing during that game. He said, "You guys have control. You call the timeouts. You do all the huddles. You're in charge. Let's see how this goes." Phoenix didn't take too kindly to it. They weren't really happy about being treated like that. Basically, they viewed that as Golden State saying, "Hey, we don't even have to try against us," kind of thing. Kurz came out and said, it's more of a team building thing. He wants to make sure his players know what to do in the right situations without him having to tell them, kind of thing. More of just trying to make sure the players know the system as well as they can, and obviously taking advantage of a matchup that they should win in order to let them do that. I personally don't see much of a problem with it. I can see why Phoenix is a little bit upset about it, but I don't really. I mean, if you don't want to be viewed that way, win more than 18 games. You know what I mean? That's all I gotta say about it. So,
yeah.
you can't really get mad when people view you as a crap team when you're a crap team. Like, I don't know. I personally thought it was kind of a smart move. I think it's a smart thing to make sure you guys know the system well enough that they can coach it if they have to. Um, Obviously, Golden State's not really in any danger of missing the playoffs or anything like that. I think they're first in the West right now. They're good to go. So I don't really see a problem with them doing it. I thought it was a pretty unique take for a coach.
Right.
Um, Outside of that, there's not really a ton going on. Like I said, trade deadline's already passed. It's more just playing out the last part of the season here. Let's pop in and look at the standings. Toronto is actually taking over first place in the East from Boston. They both have 40 wins. Toronto has 2 less losses, though, 2 less games played. So Toronto's 40 and 16, Boston's 40 and 18. So first and second there. Cleveland's coming in at third with 34 and 22, and Milwaukee is fourth with 32 and 24. Um, Over in the West, Golden State is obviously first, 44-13. Houston's right behind them, 43-13. They're just right on their heels. San Antonio is sitting at pretty at third, and Minnesota is at fourth. Um, Oklahoma City is right behind them at fifth, so they pushed back up into a playoff spot from when they were really struggling at the beginning of the year. I figured they would. They have Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony. They're not going to miss the playoffs. Not with a team like that, but
Probably not.
um, it's evening out. You're starting to see who's probably going to make it, who's probably not. There's still some battles for seventh, eighth places in the conferences individually, but for the most part, it's starting to shape up with people who are going to get in and who aren't, kind of thing. So.
Right. We shall see.
Mhm. But that's
Uh,
all I got for the NBA.
all right. Oh, we got for the hardwood. Well, you said you wanted to cap it with the NFL, so what is going on the ice?
Well, you and I are very familiar with this one because it happened during a Penguins game last night. But there was kind of the first big trade of the deadline season. Um, Dion Phaneuf is going to the Kings. The Kings are getting Dion Phaneuf and Nate Thompson from Ottawa. Ottawa gets Marion Gaborik and Nick Shore from LA. What do you think of the trade, Sean? What's your opinion of it?
Nick Shore, he's what, like a third liner, something like that.
Third, fourth line center. That was more of a. I think he went back mostly for Ottawa to make sure they didn't lose a guy at the bottom six when they sent him Nate Thompson. Kind of like.
Yeah. And what about Gabrick? I mean, what are his numbers like? I haven't
He's
seen
got
him.
14 points in 28 games this year. 7 goals, 7 assists.
Mm,
Not
mm,
lighting it up, but the main problem is more of the fact that he's only played 28 games.
yeah, it's it's a tough call. I mean, him and enough are both obviously not quite in their prime, but Vanough's still a pretty solid, top four defenseman. Whereas you look at Gabrick, and he's really fallen off these past couple years. Um, so, but then obviously, you know, you throw in Shore, and it's not a. I don't know. I would say it's not a terrible deal for either team, but I guess if I had to pick between all of them, I probably would want to have enough. But
Phaneuf's the best player still in that deal, but here's what Ottawa's doing. They were getting rid of Phaneuf's contract. Um,
yeah, what
because
is it?
Phaneuf has a horrible contract.
What does he make?
5.25 a year for
That,
the
that's
next
not
4 years.
that's not that bad though. I mean, you might want to see him
Oh,
down
sorry, no, no,
around.
no. That's his cap hit for the Kings after the retain. He's actually making $7 million a year. Is his cap?
Okay, yeah,
Um,
that's too much.
they retained 25% of the contract in the trade with the Kings, so
Oh,
his
I
hit
didn't
for the
even know
Kings is only
that.
5.25. But
Man, I
that's
don't
a
know.
space clearing move to make room to sign Carlson, in my opinion. Um, that's exactly what they're doing is getting rid of a big contract on defense so they can go ahead and hand that money straight to Eric Carlson come when his contract expires. They'll probably buy out Gabrick next year. Um, Give me 1 second. I'll pull up Gabrick's cap hit. I know it's way too high for what he's producing at. Marion Gabrick is sitting at 4.88 mil. So not ridiculously high, but still not great, for a guy that's only putting up 14 points in 28 games. Um, my guess is they buy him out at the end of this year, take the, Miller to cap penalty for that, as well as the retained salary for Dion, and then take the savings and give it straight to Eric Carlson when the time comes.
Yeah, probably. I mean, well, I don't. I mean, I'm sure they don't want to lose Carlson, but that's certainly gonna be up to them, right?
He is a UFA, so he can go wherever he wants, but, I've always said that star players generally don't leave that often. I mean, look at Stamkos.
Well, that was
Obviously,
different
Tampa's in
though.
a
I
better
mean,
situation than Ottawa.
that's the thing. It's just that because he was like hurt that entire year, and then there was all kinds of other injuries for them. I mean, Stamkos took a pay cut and came back because he knew how good they were going to be this year, and sure enough, they're like first in the league or whatever. Whereas
Yeah,
Ottawa, I mean, they're not going anywhere,
he
man.
he could go somewhere else, but it's just you don't see star players move on from teams that made them stars that often. JT's more than likely gonna stay with the Islanders. You know, I know it's a different situation, but Stamkos didn't leave Tampa. Usually when these guys are this good, teams are gonna make sure they stay. They're gonna give them whatever they want, kind of deal, kind of thing. So the thing that's really throwing me through a loop with whether Carlson stays is Melnick gonna be willing to pay him? Because we all know Melnick's trends when it comes to spending. Um,
That's the thing, man. I mean, that's what I'm saying is like on the open market, Carlson could probably get more than McDavid got.
he'll definitely match it. 12, 11, 12, somewhere in that range. I mean,
Yeah,
he's the best defender in the league. There's really no, in terms of an offensive defenseman, he's the best in the league. He's not matched. Um, I would say there's probably some guys that are maybe better two-way defenders than him, like Doughty, Hedman, guys like that. But Doughty and Hedman aren't going to score you 80 points either. So,
right.
um,
Um, I don't know. I mean, if I were him, I would be getting the hell out of. Yeah, I was talking about this last night. With Aaron. I mean, this probably won't happen, but do you ever wonder? I mean, like even when they were competing last season, they were having attendance problems in Ottawa. Now with this,
yeah,
and
they took out seats,
yeah, and like
dropped
now
their
that
percentage.
and like now that they're bad this season, and they're probably this trade was the first step of what will probably end up being a kind of a fire sale, like the Cavs did. Do you think there's any risk of them, like at the franchise itself?
Moving?
Yeah.
I don't think so, and here's why. I think the NHL would force Melnick out before they moved Ottawa. Because I think the issue is Melnick. There's no reason in a market like Ottawa you should not be spending the cap. There's no reason.
Yeah,
No
and
reason you should have an internal cap in Ottawa.
especially
Um,
when you were one shot away from the Cup final last year.
yeah, exactly, exactly. There's no excuse for it, and I can't believe they just extended Dorian. To me, Ottawa's made a bunch of boneheaded moves in the last couple of years. I mean, Zibanejad for Brassard, that looks awful now. Uh, the Duchesne trade obviously looks like shit compared to what Colorado got out of it and what Nashville got out of it. I mean, Nashville's top in the Central with Turris and Johansson and Benito down the middle. Uh, Colorado got a plethora of picks plus Samuel Girard, who's playing great for them on the blue line, and they're pushed into a wild card spot when everyone thought they'd be one of the worst teams in the league. And here's Ottawa sitting down, second, third worst team in the league right now with Matt Duchene. So um, I thought Dorian would get fired, and here they are. They just extended him. So I don't know what's going on with management, but I don't think the NHL would let a team move out of Ottawa. I mean, Ottawa is the capital of Canada. It is kind of symbolic for the NHL to be there. I don't think they would let them get out.
You see, maybe you're right, but I feel like Ottawa's always been kind of like the stepchild of that. I mean, it's not that far
They
from Montreal and Toronto, which are way more important to the league.
Yeah, they obviously always get overshadowed by Montreal and Toronto, and that's because Montreal and Toronto are original six teams.
Yeah,
They're
that
the
too.
two biggest hockey markets in the NHL. There's no doubting it.
Right.
They're massive markets. But at the same time, Ottawa is still the capital of Canada. It's still one of the biggest cities in Canada. It has more than enough fans and more than enough population to drive attendance. It's just the questionable management that's not driving it up. I mean, would you want to go see an Ottawa game this year
No.
if you're a fan in Ottawa? I mean, come on, they're terrible. I know they made a good push last year, but even that was kind of out of nowhere. You know what I mean? It's not like they lit up the regular season last year. No one really picked them to win any of the matchups in the playoffs. I think I had them out in the first round in my bracket.
I think everyone did.
Yeah, it's kind of like Nashville in the West. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they made it, and yeah, it's good that they made the playoffs. But I don't think anyone thought they were going to end up being a cup team. I don't think anyone thought Ottawa was going to be a conference final team. I think they overachieved in the playoffs, and we're starting to see that now, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I like highly doubt that will happen, but it just makes you wonder sometimes how long they could get away. I mean, especially when you're not spending to the cap when you were a competitive team, it's very confusing to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the NHL has a big sit down with Melnick soon and says, "Hey, change the way you're running this team, or we'll find somebody else to run it," kind of thing.
Yeah,
Which I mean, I know he owns the team. Theoretically, they can't force him to sell it, but they can if they want to. I mean, look at what the NBA did with Donald Sterling. Like, there's ways they can get him out of there if they want him out of there. So, um, I think you'd see that before they do relocate. Now, if they do that and the team starts spinning to the cap and they still don't get the attendance, maybe. But I think you would see some other moves first before that happens.
right. Yeah,
Um,
it'll be interesting.
but speaking of moving and new franchises, I don't know if you heard about this. Seattle officially applied for an expansion team.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, they have
another
actually
expansion
put $10
draft.
million
Gee.
down. It's looking like probably 2020, 2021, around that time frame. That's the when they would get started up. So still another 2, 3 years out. But they're starting the process, and it's looking like Seattle is going to be team number 32 in the NHL.
That should be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to having another expansion draft so soon after this one.
Yeah, I know, right?
Uh, Pens aren't going to be. They're going to lose somebody here. Obviously, it's 3 years off. If I had to guess right now, I'm saying it's probably going to be a Brian Russ, Connor Sheary type of guy. Um, More likely, but we obviously there's a lot that can change in 3 years with rosters. So too early to
Oh
really start predicting
yeah,
anything with that.
yeah, for sure.
But the only other thing that came out that I saw that looks like it's big news, Brian Elliott, obviously goalie for the Philadelphia Flyers, our favorite team, um, is going to miss 5 to 6 weeks after having a surgery to repair a core muscle. Um, that is not good news if you're the Philadelphia Flyers. And that is because Philly is currently in the playoff race. They're actually third in the Metro right now, and only sitting 2 points behind our Pens. However, they're going to have to lean on Michael Neuvirth every night for the next 5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, not great. I wish I felt bad, but
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Philly with that news look for some goalie help here coming at the deadline, which is in 2 weeks. We're going to start seeing some trades ramping up. We're going to see more movement. Going to see a lot more action in the NHL. Especially look for the Rangers. I don't know if you saw anything about the Rangers sending out the letter to their fans,
yeah, I did.
basically saying, "Hey, we're gonna be selling off a lot of people here at the deadline.
Well, they
Don't
want
be
to
mad
get.
at us. Don't hate us."
Well, they want to dump Nash, don't they? Because
Nash is more than likely going to move. They've already requested his team list for his no trade clause. I wouldn't be surprised to see McDonough out the door. I think they would listen to offers on Mark Stahl, Dick Holden, Michael Grabner is probably going to be gone because he's an upcoming UFA. There's going to be a lot of movement out of New York, I believe, if you ask me. And
yeah, what does Nash make? It's like sevens, right? Something like that.
6.8, I want to say.
As wait, so
Uh,
what the that's what the that's what the Pens are playing Kessel, and I'm gonna go ahead out on a limb and say their numbers probably aren't very comparable.
uh, Nash is not playing very well. We'll put it that way.
He never really has lived up to the hype, really ever. So, uh,
Ooh, sorry, 7.8, not 6.8.
oh God,
Now he is in the last year of that deal, so some team
that's
might take a flyer on him just because
Mm.
You know, New York can retain some salary and they don't have to clear a ton of space for him. But uh, let's look at his stats this year. He's got 57 games played. He has 27 points in those 57 games. 17 goals, 10 assists. That's not going to cut it. Not for
No,
7.8 million.
definitely not.
Um, that's bad, man. That's I don't know. Like I said, some team might take a flyer on him, especially if New York was willing to retain 30-40% salary on him, which they would because he's 1 year left. What do they care? You know what I mean? Um, it doesn't really matter. So he'll get moved. I don't know where he'll get moved to. I'd have to look really in depth at who needs what. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, to see him come back to Columbus, though, because I know they do need some help in the scoring department, and they are starting to fall out of the playoff race. They need to get back into it. So, and plus, I know they have the space for it. So, I would not be surprised to see a Columbus reunion for Rick Nash at all.
Yeah. Um, oh man, yeah. There's gonna be a lot of interesting moves, I think, here in the next couple few weeks, really. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think it's going to be an interesting deadline. There's a lot of stories going around. I mean, you look at what are the Islanders going to do with JT coming up for his contract extension? Are they going to try to make a push for the playoffs to keep him around? Are they going to sell? The Rangers obviously selling. You're going to see. I think Columbus is going to be an active team. I think I think Tampa's probably going to make some moves to shore up there because they're obviously going to go all in for the season. No reason for them not to. Washington's probably going to go all in again, even though they just said they're not going to do that anymore. They're going to fall into that trap.
nah, they watch. They'll get Nash. It's like a rental.
I can't see it.
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
mean,
That would be really dumb.
yeah, I know, but the one place I don't think Washington needs help is on the wings.
Yeah.
I think if they got anybody, it would probably be a blue liner, because they have Bowie and Juice playing big minutes on that third pairing, both as rookies. So I think ideally they'd want a veteran presence there if they do make a move. Pittsburgh, they're gonna be active. I mean, they're gonna get another center. I can tell you that for sure. Listen to the JR's comments. I'm surprised they haven't already. Um,
Well, yeah, I think they really want to. I just think there's only so much available, and on top of that, the asking prices are ridiculous, and they're even
they are, but
slightly.
they'll come down. They'll come down
They
for the
will come
deadline. You know.
down, but they are still, I think, slightly a little higher, like just for the Penguins, because I really don't think anybody wants to help the Penguins. I mean, they would, nobody
I
wants
think
them to
if
three-peat. So,
yeah, I think if anyone is gonna do it, it's probably gonna be a Western Conference team. I think they're much more likely to be willing to make a move to help the Pens because they obviously don't have to play them in the playoffs unless it gives them all the way to the Cup. So.
um,
Um,
what's your take on the fanfare of them reacquiring Cullen?
it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Cullen's not happy with the minutes and the time he's getting in Minnesota, and he would be really cheap to get. I mean, there's no way it would cost you more than a fourth round pick for Matt Cullen at this point. There's
Yeah,
no way.
and that's why I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it, but my inner my inner armchair GM is just like this guy walked in free agency, which wasn't their fault. I mean, like it was his choice, but it feels kind of strange to me to now have to give up assets for a guy who walked in free agency. That, like, technically speaking, you may have been able to keep if you really, really wanted to.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think the Pens wanted to keep Cullen. I think Cullen wanted to try a shot somewhere else. I know he has a lot of ties to Minnesota as home state and everything like that, so I
yeah,
think that's why he did it. But I don't think he'd be opposed to be coming back to Pittsburgh for the second half of the season, especially since he's not happy with what he's getting in Minnesota.
No, I don't think he'd be opposed. And like I said, because it would cost, like a fourth or fifth round pick, which is not a big deal.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the end of the world. It just seems weird to me. It's just like you don't
At
see
the
that.
very least, it's more depth.
Right.
If someone goes down like Shahan or, God forbid, Malkin or Sid, I'd be much more comfortable seeing Cullen playing as a third line center than Rowney, you know, um, if it came down to it.
Yeah.
So, um, I think it'll probably happen. It's one of the moves I think, even if they get a 3C, I could see them bringing in Cullen just to play freaking winger on the fourth line if he has to. Um, just because he knows the organization, it's veteran leadership in the locker room. He's obviously a great locker room guy. They love him in Pittsburgh. You know they do. Um, so, and the cost of acquisition is going to be really cheap compared to whatever everyone else is asking for people like, Ottawa's asking for a first, a top prospect, and a roster player for Brassard, and they're high if they think they're going to get that from anyone that has any sense, because Brassard is not worth that. I've heard they're asking for a first and a prospect for Peugeot too, and Peugeot's a career third line center. I mean, I think Dorian's out there trying to rob people because he got robbed with Duchesne. That's just not how it works. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It should be interesting.
hmm
But we'll see. I
yeah, we'll
mean,
have a lot to report on the next couple weeks, I think, for the NHL.
oh
So
yeah, big time. All right, well, if that's all you got, you said you wanted to do the NFL last, so how
yeah,
about it?
yeah, let's cover just a few little things that we didn't cover last week because of the time restraints, and we were talking about the Super Bowl too much. One thing that happened about 2 weeks ago that we never really got to discuss was the Alex Smith trade. I'm sure you heard about that. Kansas City traded Alex Smith to Washington for a quarterback in Fuller and I think a third round pick or something like that. Um, Alex Smith's more than likely going to be the starter for the Redskins going forward, and that probably means that Kirk Cousins is out and is going to sign somewhere else at this point in time. Um, he's one of the most touted free agent quarterbacks that have come out in a while. There's a lot of teams that be lining up for him. Denver, Arizona are two right off the top of the bat that I can think of. Cleveland will make a pitch for him, but if I'm him, I'm not going to Cleveland. I don't know why he won't go to Cleveland voluntarily, but um, it's gonna be interesting. I'm actually thinking Denver would be a great fit for him because Denver has the defense, they have the weapons. They're just missing a quarterback that can actually play football because Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch cannot play football. So, um,
Yeah, Cleveland rocks, except for the Browns.
um, and then one of the things I wanted to talk about. Did you hear about the Josh McDaniels situation with the Colts? I'm sure.
Honestly, no, I did not.
Okay, well, before the Super Bowl happened, Josh McDaniels, who was the offensive coordinator for the Patriots,
Oh yeah, he was gonna come and
agreed
coach.
to
Right.
take the head coach job for Indy. Come right after the Super Bowl, he comes out and says, "Yeah, never mind," and stays on as head or offensive coordinator with New England, leaving the Colts without a head coach after pretty much everyone else had been signed. Obviously, as a Colts fan, it's hard for me to stay objective with this one. I get that he hadn't signed a contract officially. That's because he was still with a team that was actively playing and he couldn't. But he had made a verbal agreement and he had allowed them to announce it. And it even signed assistant coaches to come with him. It's a pretty dirtbag move, in my opinion, to back out at that point. Especially given that all these assistant coaches you signed are now out of a job if the new coach doesn't want to keep them. Because most guys bring in their own assistants and they might not keep any of these guys that he signed, and boom, they're screwed. So, uh, classless move in my opinion from McDaniel's. Not really surprising given the organization he's with, in my opinion. But Colts did finally get a head coach. They signed Frank Reich. He was the offensive coordinator for Philly, the team that beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Just like to throw that out there. And he's going to be coming in, taking the reins as head coach for them next year. Personally, I think they're better off. I think Josh McDaniels is not a great head coach. I think his time in Denver will show that pretty handily. He did win a playoff game against the Steelers, one, but that was Tebow magic, and we all know that.
Oh Lord, yeah, I still can't even believe
Yeah,
that
you
happened.
remember that era, right? Tebow somehow throws 40% completion rate and still wins a game.
Only the Steelers would be able
Yeah.
to find a way to lose that game.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you, but I was not happy with McDaniels. I was not happy as a Colts fan. I thought it was a shitty move, and I'm actually more happy with the guy they got. But still, it was. I don't doubt at all that some part of that might have been Kraft saying, "Hey, tell him you'll sign with them," and then back out because that's just the kind of person Robert Kraft and the Patriots are.
That's
We'll end it with some
possible.
sad news, though. Last thing I wanted to talk about. Speaking of the Colts, I don't know if you heard about Edwin Jackson. Um,
No.
he was a linebacker for the Colts. Young guy, he was only 24. Really starting to take off in his career. He got killed the day before the Super Bowl in a drunk driving accident. He was outside of a car with an Uber driver. They had pulled over. They were on the side of the road for some reason. I don't know if they were stopped somewhere or something like that. But some guy that was driving drunk came and hit both of them, killed them both, unfortunately. So,
Jesus.
um, yeah. Jim Irsay has set up a scholarship in honor of him this week for all that. But it's been a rough week to be a Colts fan. That's never good news to hear, and it's tragic that a kid with so much potential gets his life cut short. And in this case, isn't anything that's his fault at all. He was in no way or shape involved in driving or anything with it. It was something, a tragic accident. The kid gets his life taken as an innocent bystander and something. So um, it's not good to see, and it's really unfortunate news. Um, Colts have been really classy as an organization. They paid for his entire funeral. They paid for the funeral of the Uber driver that was driving him too. They paid for pretty much everything, and they're set up a scholarship for him. But sad news for the Colts fans. Sad news for the NFL in general. You never want to see a young guy like that, taken out of his prime.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
It's insane how much that happens too, when people are like outside of a car and get hit like that.
Yeah, man. It was from what I've read about it, pretty crazy situation. I guess he was with the Uber driver. They stopped somewhere. I don't know if they were at a place they were going to. He was picking something up or something. Or I read reports that maybe he was sick, which he might have been partying and impaired himself. But if he wasn't driving, that's not his fault. But some guy just comes, runs the road, gets on the sidewalk, and hits him, and then hit and runs as well. By the way, they did finally catch the guy. So he's kind of screwed at this point, but it's just a sad story all around, and it should never happen. Drinking and driving is something that just really should never happen in this with Uber nowadays and cabs and all this shit you have to get around without having to drive while you're drunk. There's really no reason it should ever happen. So
Yeah. I mean, I've never been drunk in my life, and I don't plan on doing it. But if I
yeah,
were, I definitely would not drive.
I mean, I drink occasionally, but that's one of my main rules is I don't ever do it in a situation where I might have to drive later that night.
Right.
Um, it's not something I take lightly, and it's not something I would ever really do. It's just a stupid thing to do. You might think you're fine, you're more than likely not fine, and somebody's gonna end up getting killed because of it. So, PSA, getting a little bit into the out of the sports realm, but don't drink and drive. Don't ever do anything stupid like that. Call an Uber, it's not worth it. You can go get your car the next day. It's just not worth killing somebody over. So,
That means you, Rob. Yeah.
yeah, Rob.
Don't do it.
But
All
that's
right.
all I got, man, for
All
this week.
right, brother. Sounds good. Well, as the months go, again, like I said, we'll we'll keep an eye on the Olympics since that's going on, and obviously with since we're not going to have a whole lot to report on the fronts of football and baseball, maybe we could even work in some you know next month some March Madness or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Once
we'll have plenty to cover.
and then realistically after that we'll be back into the baseball season. So
Yeah, we'll have the NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs.
oh yeah, um,
A lot of stuff to talk about. So,
for sure.
we won't have a lack of stuff to cover. It'll probably be more NHL, NBA centric over the next couple weeks into the months. But yeah,
But yeah,
we'll still have stuff to cover. So,
for sure. All right,
all
man.
right.
Well, thank you as always.
Mm-hmm.
Thank to those who are listening. If you enjoyed this, check out our channel on YouTube, Console Space. We do this sports segment every week, and we also get together and record a podcast talking about video games once a week. So check that out, like and subscribe, all that stuff if you enjoy it. Ciao, we'll do it again next week, my man, and I will talk to you then.
Sounds good.
Peace.
Peace.